So now is the time for our scripture and our sermon for this first Sunday in Advent. Scripture that Catherine read comes from chapter 13. It is some thick scripture, so let me go ahead and read it. Chapter 13 of Mark, verse 24. But in those days, following that distress, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its lights. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, people will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds with great power and glory, and he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you will know that summer is near. Even so, when you see these things happening, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. But about that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Be on guard, be alert. You do not know when that time will come. It's like a man going away. He leaves his house and puts his servants in charge, each with an assigned task, and tells them, the one at the door, to keep watch. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know when the owner of the house will come back, whether in the evening or at midnight, or when the rooster crows or at dawn. If he comes suddenly, do not let him find you sleeping. What I say to you, I say to everyone. Watch. So as we've already talked, the theme for Advent this year is on the road. These themes are prepared about a year ahead of time, and there is a certain irony in the notion of being on the road when many of us are moving much less than we would in a normal year. Working from home, forgoing Thanksgiving travel. We are currently avoiding planes, trains, and automobiles. We're kind of the opposite of being on the road right now. We're stuck at home in a pretty literal sense for many of us. But in other ways, we are on the road. I mean, my family did move to Iowa, and all of you are thinking about how this church, this congregation, might be relevant in this new decade for the Cedar Valley. So there's movement there in the essence of what it means to be Cedar Falls Mennonite Church. And I get the real sense that many of us do take this daily discipleship journey with Jesus seriously. That we are on the road with Jesus. But after Chris and I reviews these Advent materials, I would bet money. I don't know if a Mennonite pastor can say that, but I would bet money that on the road was the theme definitely picked before we all learned a little bit of what it looks like to live during a pandemic. What I hear in this overarching theme of on the road is the idea that we are moving towards something. But in the deep reality of our journey as Christians, there's this deep reality in our journey as Christians that we do never really fully arrive, right? We're always on a journey, and the way Catherine talked about it, the scenery keeps changing, right? We may have driven this a million times back to our parents' house for Christmas or to our children's house for Thanksgiving. We may have made this journey. The scenery keeps changing. We keep moving. We keep crossing state lines and seeing different sights, but we're never quite there as Christians. We're always on the road. Sometimes we have to turn around and go back. Sometimes we have to wrestle with our past, whether it's trauma that was inflicted on us or mistakes that we made. It's like we forgot Jasper's fuzzy jammies at home and we have to go back for them, right? Just like any road trip. Sometimes we're moving forward and sometimes back. So the first theme of on the road is on the road to readiness, as Catherine talked really well about. It's about being ready. And then we have this passage. We hear it in the scripture. Jesus said some pretty intense things about being ready. We make a lot of choices every day about being ready. I mean, a lot of us have things that we carry every day to be ready, right? I don't know. I might speak just for myself, but as I stand up, I check all 4 of my pockets, and I make sure my one pocket has my phone, my other pocket has my multi-tool and my keys, and the other pocket has a wallet, and the other one has a handkerchief, right? That's what I do. That's how I get ready for the day to walk out. I know that I personally don't like wearing, this is a funny thing, I don't like wearing slip-on shoes. I want them to strap on or tie up or something, because if I have to run, I don't want shoes that are going to slip off. So I want to be ready. I want to be prepared to run. I don't know what I'm running from, but I'm just saying I don't like slip-on shoes. Even for many people, it's one of the reasons electric vehicles, one of the struggles electric vehicles still face, is people can't just go hop in their car and drive across the country without trying to making sure you plugged it in last night and planning much of your trip around plugging in and charging. It's one of the reasons the readiness of an electric vehicle is different. And it's one of the struggles that it faces, that this great technology faces. But but what kind of journey are we going on right now? What do we need to be ready? I mean, I've got my face mask and my hand sanitizer, right? Is that part of? I know that's part of my journey right now, and that's part of being prepared. My bike tires are aired up, and I try to keep my fuel tank at half full most of the time. Is that it? I guess what I would say is I think the preparing right now is about the preparing that Jesus talks about, and the preparing that we're looking at is about knowing God and knowing Jesus and seeking them and seeking to know them better, and also trying to be faithful to what we know about them. Now this passage from the Gospel of Mark, this from chapter 13, it's pretty intense, right? It's lesser pastors would shy away from it on a Sunday morning, I believe. But fear not, I'm here for you all. The deal is that chapter 13 starts out simply enough. Jesus and the disciples are leaving the temple. And the disciples are like, this is verse 1, and kind of coming through. The disciples are like, whoa, those buildings are huge, right? And then Jesus is like, all those buildings are coming down. Not one stone will be left on the other. And then Peter, James, and John, they pull Jesus aside. They pull him aside. They don't give him grief in front of people. And they say, like, when is this going to happen? What's going on? When is it going to happen? How do we know, right? And then Jesus goes all kinds of, like, Book of Daniel prophecy on them, right? In the second half of Daniel, not the cute first half about the lion's den, but the second half of Daniel with like the winged beasts with too many heads kind of stuff. Like Jesus gets into that mode of prophecy. And 37 verses later of like lots of red text of Jesus talking at him, we still don't know when this is going to happen. Jesus tells us to watch out, be ready, don't sleep. Are the doomsday preppers right? Should we all have buckets of dehydrated food in our basement? I know there's many Christians who feel that that's how to understand being ready from this text. But there's another angle I would invite you to consider here, some perspective for us to think as we try to make sense of what it means to be prepared in light of this scripture. His words encouraging preparedness, right, and encouraging us to be prepared, they come in this address about the destruction of the temple, right? That's what the disciples are asking about. That's how this all started. When is this going to happen? Now, how many of you know that the temple that Jesus was talking about, the disciples were nearby in the story, it was destroyed in the year 70 AD. How many people know that historical fact? So it was about 40 years after Jesus died Those stones fell down. Now, there is still one wall of the temple remaining, so in the literal sense of not one stone standing upon each other, it didn't happen, right? There's still the Wailing Wall, as they call it, in Jerusalem still stands, but the temple is no more. And most scholars believe that Mark's gospel, which most scholars believe is the first gospel, we think Mark was the first gospel that was written. But most people think it was written in the year 70. It was written after 72, 73. It was written after the temple was destroyed. So there's a lot to sort out in chapter 13. It is dense, and it is packed with imagery and ideas and concepts and claims. Right? And Jesus says in chapter 13, surely this generation will not pass before all these things happen. Oh, well, maybe it happened in 70 AD, 40 years later. That's one way to interpret that, right? These are all claims that we have to figure out how to make sense. Are they hyperbolic? Are they parabolic? What's trying to be said here? And there's not too many scholars who agree on how to put all these pieces of chapter 13 together, because there's a lot of pieces, and they're intense. Now, and there's entire denominations based on how we interpret some of these things, right? The amillennials and the premillennials and the post, right? Anyways, but there's one thing I want to say that's a side note that's not really important to my sermon, but I came across it in my studies. There's this part in here that says Jesus and the angels will come and gather all, right? All of the followers will be gathered from the corners of the earth. And oftentimes that scripture is interpreted as as exclusionary, right? Jesus is going to take the good ones, right? But the intention was, in the midst of all this, that people are being persecuted for following Jesus. People are being turned away from families and friends and communities because they follow Jesus. And Jesus promises, no, I will find you. No matter where you are, I will find you and I will take care of you. Even if everyone else has abandoned you, I will find you to the ends of the earth. So I just want to hear that, and I want us to frame that differently, because we spend so much time, we've been given so many filters that tell us that Jesus is trying to exclude people, and it's not. Jesus is telling us that he will include and remember all those who have sought him. It's just a different story, that though the world has rejected you, God has not. Anyways, sorry, that was a rabbit trail, but that struck me very, very differently than it has in the past. And I think it's important to hearing what kind of preparedness it is. Does that make sense? It's an invitation into God's love, into sharing God's love, and being part of the story of God right now. So, but this passage from chapter 13 is the way that Advent lectionary year B starts. This is our gospel text for Sunday. And we begin this time of anticipating and waiting, this time of Advent, how we're waiting for the Son of God to be born to a young woman in a barn. We are called to be ready. We are called to prepare ourselves. Are we preparing our houses? Are we putting up lights? Are we getting our families ready? Are we preparing our hearts and our minds? Are we preparing our underground bunkers? Be ready. Watch out. God is coming. God is being more fully revealed. The way Jesus says, he says, all things are being fulfilled. Keep watch for God. Be ready to move, because as we keep saying, God is doing a new thing, right? God is moving in and among us. And the promised child of God, the Messiah, is coming. God keeps promises. No matter where you are, God will remember you. So how would we live if we trusted God's provision and care? How do we prepare for God? I think it's by leaning into the mystery. Let us pause for some quiet before we reflect on what we've heard today.